Welcome back. The National Prosecuting Authority has recently announced that the formal inquest into the deaths of 144 psychiatric patients in Gauteng that took place in 2015 will start in July this year at the High Court in Pretoria. Now, many of the patients died allegedly from starvation and neglect after the Gauteng Health Department cancelled its contract with Life Esidimeni, apparently to save money. Now, thousands of patients were subsequently transferred to unsuitable NGOs where many died. The formal inquest follows damning findings by former Deputy Chief Justice Dikgang Moseneke, who led the inquiry into this tragedy. The Moseneke found that the government officials acted in breach of the law and the Constitution. And Life Esidimeni Family Committee member Nxumalo and Mark Heywood, Executive Director at Section 27, join us now to look at the latest developments in this story. Thanks so much, Christine and Mark. Welcome to Morning Live.
Good morning.
Morning.
Christine, let me start with you. As one of the family representatives, what is your take on the situation, given that it started in 2015, at least, some steps towards finding justice and a form of closure. We are now into 2021, 6 years later. How do you feel, and what are the families saying at this stage?
Morning, Sakina. Well, basically, as families, we are happy we finally getting to a point of an inquest, but we have asked for an inquest as far back as 2016. For us to get here now, for us, it's a bit late, but we're still very happy that we're going to get to this, that we actually finally, going to have the inquest.
Mark, Premier David Makhura at the time gave assurances that the government is committed to holding those responsible for the Life Esidimeni tragedy to account. Can you give us an update? Who's been held to account to date?
Well, I think, first of all, I agree fully with Christine. This is very late, but I guess it's better late than never. And I hope that the inquest will take place with urgency and that it will lead to prosecutions, because there is no doubt that there are individuals who are criminally responsible for the deaths at Life Esidimeni. And the problem is, to answer your question, is that 5 years later, despite Premier Makhura's promises, despite investigations by the National Prosecuting Authority, despite the judgment and award and comments of former Deputy Chief Justice Moseneke, nobody has been held to account. All of the people who were fingered, if you like, during the arbitration continue to be free. And that is a problem, and I think it is a cause of terrible soreness to the families and the survivors of the Life Esidimeni disaster, that those fine words and promises of justice have in fact not been matched by action.
So, Christine, has there been any communication from the authorities as to why there hasn't been any further action to date?
To be honest with you, we just kept begging after the 2016, up until I think it was last year, when eventually they came back saying that they're going to now proceed with the action against those they think are responsible. But the fact that the evidence did not lead to anybody, they could not go ahead and actually charge people. But we kept on nagging and asking them to continue investigating and
losing that connection there to Christine, the signal breaking up. Let's see if we can maybe sort that out. In the meantime, Mark, the then Gauteng MEC for Health, Qetani Mahlangu, when she resigned, of course, you'll remember she said that she's doing so because the deaths occurred under her leadership, under her watch. And as the responsible MEC and as the final authority in the department, she would take political accountability. Have you since heard anything from her or about her in relation to this case?
I don't think that we've heard very much from her at all. political accountability was very welcome. And of course, we were very happy when she was removed from that position and when another person was put in as the MEC. But as we know, the truth is important. Justice Moseneke, in his judgment, said explicitly that there were certain things that were not explained to him before the arbitration, and that there were certain issues that remained to be investigated in order to understand why what had happened had actually happened. So, as we're saying, justice has been elusive. And what I would also say is that this is not just an issue of the past, of 5 years ago. It's an issue of the present, because the state of mental health care services in South Africa remains woeful. The Human Rights Commission presented a report of its investigation to Parliament a few months ago, which shows that the types of suffering and torture and trauma that were experienced at Life Esidimeni go on. They may not be causing deaths, and they may not be causing so many deaths, but we are not respecting the rights of mental health care users in this country. And one of the legacies, I guess, that the families, and Christine can speak on this, most wanted was an assurance that this would never happen again, that this would lead to improvements for people who remain in care institutions, people with mental illness.
And then looking at the latest development here, Mark, this inquest initiated by the NPA. So just on a point of clarity, will this be a separate process from the process that is being initiated at provincial level? Explain to us how this is going to work.
Yes, this will be a separate process. It will be an inquest to determine if there is any criminal responsibility. And the families will once again, as I understand it, be represented by Section 27, which is very important. But my fear, and I'm not speaking for Section 27, I no longer work there, I'm just speaking as a human rights activist, my fear is that we will have a lengthy inquest that will require the families to once more go through the secondary trauma of reliving the experiences of loss and pain, and then we will spend many months waiting for the findings of the inquest, and then we don't know whether anything will happen at all. So, whilst the inquest is important, it's really not sufficient, and we need to be seeing things happening. Other promises were made to the families at the time of Justice Moseneke's judgment to build a monument, and so on and so on. That there is so much that needs to be seen to be being done if there is to be true healing and moving forward from what happened in 2016.
Christine, just trying to see if your connection is better now. One of the number of people announced by Deputy Chief Justice Dikgang Moseneke during that alternative dispute resolution hearing, at least one of the issues was the number of people that needed to be paid out. Do we know at this stage how many have been paid out? Are there any payments still outstanding, or has that process been properly concluded?
This is one of the things that Mark was just referring to, that we don't have an update as to how many families have been paid and how many families still need to be paid. We have requested that the Premier's office to give us this information. We, at this stage, don't know, Sakina, and we've been asking, but still don't have any feedback on it.
So, is there a reason as to why you don't have this? Because I would have thought, because at the beginning you guys presented a united front as the families, and we always spoke to you, and there was always a handle on what was going on. What has since changed in that regard, Christine?
I think it's the typical way how government handles things. We look united for the media, but as soon as the cameras go off, then the shutdown begins, where you don't get information, where you can't get a response to anything. We're right back there again.
So, Mark, do we know how many patients are still missing? And also, at the time, it was discovered that the NGOs, some of the NGOs were not even licensed. Many lacked facilities for specialized chronic care of mentally ill patients. They didn't have the skills in some instances to take care of those patients, and some patients were even tortured from what we learned from the inquest. So what has since changed? Do we know anything more about the repercussions that have flowed from that?
Well, I think Christine has said it. Not enough has changed. There hasn't been enough transparency. There hasn't been enough accountability. There hasn't been enough reporting back. We don't know what happened to those. I mean, we know that several of those NGOs, those illegal NGOs providing alleged care, were closed down. But you know, there's just no reporting, and Premier Makura needs to do better. The MEC for Health, the new MEC for Health, needs to do better. The DG of the Premier, Pindile Baleni, has now moved to the presidency. She was very involved in those days. You can't move and leave unfinished business, particularly when there are still untended wounds arising from this thing. Everybody knows what the suffering, what the pain, what the trauma was. The ball is in government's court. That was what they were ordered to do by Deputy Chief Justice Moseneke in order to make reparation and justice possible. It has happened only partially, and that is, I guess, the cause of a great unhappiness.
And as we wrap it, Christine, having seen a few inquests recently, does this decision by the NPA give you any sort of real hope that you will not only hear what exactly happened, but for justice to actually take its course?
So, Tina, I can't say that it gives us comfort, but we are certainly praying that we get people charged at the end of this process. We have waited for so long. And I must say that nothing has changed in terms of Gauteng, in terms of mental health care users and their treatment. No report has come out. Nothing has come out. So we are concerned all round as to what is happening, because ever since the arbitration, we've literally gotten a wall. We don't get any feedback. We can't reach anybody. So, of course, our concern is that we're not going to get any information. And this inquest might just lead to, like Mark is saying, another long protracted process, and then still at the end of the process, not get anybody charged. And if that happens, I think it will be a sad, sad state of affairs.
Mark, final word, your expectations, and what would you ideally like to see happen from here on in?
Well, I'd like two things, and I think the families would like two things. The first of all is that this inquest, now that it is taking place, that it takes place properly, that it takes place swiftly, thoroughly, that it leads to criminal findings, because we know that there was criminality involved, and that it leads swiftly to people being charged and tried for the 144 deaths and the injuries that happened at Life Esidimeni. But what we would also like to see is mental health being taken seriously by the Department of Health, of attention to the quality of mental health care, of oversight, proper independent oversight of mental health care facilities and treatment. We need a revolution in care. And I'll finish on this point, which is to say that we know that COVID-19 has tremendously exacerbated an existing epidemic in our country of mental illness. So there is a greater need than there has ever been in history before for good quality, dignified mental health care services. That would be the best testimony to the suffering of those who died at Life Esidimeni, that it brought about change.
Well, thank you so much to both Christine Nxumalo, Family Committee member, and Mark Heywood, talking to us there about the latest developments in the Life Esidimeni saga. And as you can hear, quite a bit of discontent and also a lack of information coming forward. But we'll keep an eye on these developments and let you know as soon as there are any further developments. All right, let's just quickly squeeze in